I knew it was over the moment I saw the employee spotlight email land in my inbox, bright and shiny, with confetti graphics and a pull quote from Jared, the new senior product evangelist, or whatever title they'd invented for him. It's an honor to be leading innovation, it said. Underneath, a photo of Jared giving a thumbs up in front of my prototype, my whiteboard sketches blurred just enough to avoid legal liability, and my Gotham ergonomic, the one I ordered myself and paid for out of pocket because the company wasn't approving new furniture requests this quarter. Jared, fresh out of some incubator startup that collapsed in under a year. Jared, who once asked if our code was vegan friendly. Jared, who just 3 weeks prior asked me to explain what an API actually did in front of the entire dev team, and now he was leading innovation. Cute. So I sat there in the break room, coffee going cold, blinking at my phone while everyone else oohed and awed over the announcement like it was the second coming of Steve Jobs. No one said my name, not even a nod. It was like I'd been scrubbed out of the narrative by some overcaffeinated PR intern with a delete key and a grudge. That morning, I'd already pushed 3 patches to prod, rewritten 2 security modules, and filed a proposal for something I knew damn well would save the company $300K annually. But sure, let's give Jared the kudos. He's got a TikTok following. Must be worth more than 5 years of keeping this ship from capsizing. If you're here, by the way, listening, maybe reliving some version of this hell from your own life, do me a favor, tap that like button and hit subscribe. I know, every channel begs for it, but seriously, 95% of you ghosts never subscribe, and it makes our whole team feel like we're screaming into a void lined with unpaid overtime. It really does help us keep dropping these stories, especially the ones they don't want told. Back to Jared. He arrived like most overconfident hires do, late to meetings, early to self-promotion, allergic to source control. Within 2 days of onboarding, he'd locked himself out of Git twice and scheduled a brainstorming jam sesh with a pastel PowerPoint template labeled Blue Sky Visioneering. I showed up. So did marketing. Jared did not. Then came the meetings. The first time they introduced him to the board, I was told to hang back and observe. Carol, the director, said with that oily, condescending smile he reserves for women over 35 who dare speak with confidence. Just want to see how Jared gels with the big picture stuff. You're more of a detail operator, right? Detail operator. The woman who literally built the prototype they're now raising funds on. The woman who rewrote the entire backend architecture during lockdown, while the rest of the team took mental health weeks and sent Slack updates from hot tubs. But sure, let Jared gel. I said nothing, just nodded, took notes. And later that night, I pulled down an old binder from the top shelf of my home office, the one with the faded duct tape spine and 3 yellowing dividers. Inside, early wireframes, timestamped commits, email printouts, all from the months before we officially incorporated, all under my name. I flipped to the first divider. Tucked behind a USB drive was a post-it I barely remembered writing. It said in smudged pen, just in case. I smiled. Not because I was angry, though I was, because I'd seen this play out before. I'd worked too long in this industry not to recognize the arc. Woman builds, man gets title. Woman supports, man gets press. Woman questions, woman becomes difficult. I was already on step 3. HR had asked me just last week if I'd consider a peer coaching seminar to improve team dynamics. Translation: stop making Jared look bad. So I leaned in, started saying less, watching more. I let Jared bungle the sprint planning meetings. Let him misquote our roadmap to investors. Let him send out a build with the test API key still in it, all while documenting everything. Timestamps, Git logs, Slack threads. I created a personal vault on a separate drive, not out of spite, out of muscle memory. Because the longer you stay in the game, the more you learn, it's not the loudest person in the room who wins. It's the one who brings receipts, and mine. It'd been baking for years. The first cut came disguised as a calendar update. Leadership sync core product alignment. The kind of meeting I used to lead. Now, I wasn't even invited. No email, no Slack ping. Just a flicker on Jared's screen as I passed his desk, the title visible between bites of his third protein bar of the morning. He caught me glancing and grinned like a Labrador who'd just found a stick. "Oh yeah," he said, wiping crumbs off his chin, "you're not on this one. It's just like high-level vision stuff." "Right," I replied, not breaking stride. Wouldn't want to contaminate the vision with facts. He didn't get it. Of course he didn't. Then came the reassignments. Suddenly, I wasn't handling client-side architecture or roadmap strategy. I was tasked with formatting sprint retrospectives and triple-checking Jira tickets. "We just need someone with your thoroughness," the director said, as if he was handing me a medal instead of a mop. "And let's face it, Carol, no one organizes postmortems like you." Postmortems, that was rich, because while they were busy killing my career in slow motion, I was preparing theirs for burial. Still, I played along, nodded, smiled, went home and created a private repo. I started logging everything. Every deleted comment in Confluence, every minor tweak Jared made to my specs before pasting them into his decks. I even began saving audio notes to myself, timestamp summaries of decisions I wasn't allowed to make anymore, but was still cleaning up afterward. HR got involved soon after. A vague email requesting a quick sync turned into a 30-minute gaslight opera featuring words like optics, feedback culture, and perceived intensity. Apparently, someone on the team felt I came off as abrasive in a Slack thread about data integrity. The irony. The thread in question had been me correcting Jared when he suggested we could just fudge the conversion metrics until launch. I'm not saying you meant to be sharp, HR said, tilting her head like a middle school guidance counselor. But in a startup environment, tone really matters. I wanted to ask if tone mattered more than accuracy. If male colleagues were ever asked to soften their tone when pointing out that, say, the revenue model was missing 3 zeros. But I knew the answer. So instead, I said I'd reflect on the feedback and engage in more active listening. Then I walked straight to my desk and added a new folder to the vault, HR Comms. By the end of the week, Jared had uploaded a pitch deck to the shared drive titled Q4 Vision. I opened it out of curiosity. Slide 1 was my design. Slide 2, my exact chart. Slide 3, my words, lifted straight from a strategy doc I'd written 2 months prior. No edits, not even a font change. I stared at it for a full minute, wondering if it was even worth confronting him. Then I realized it wasn't theft, not in his mind, it was collaboration. I was just supporting the narrative. That's what they called it in meetings now. Everyone contributes. No one claims, except of course when investors show up. Then it's all Jared's baby, so I made my own slides, not for them, for me. I started tracking versions, saved comparison screenshots, watermarked originals, quietly downloaded every invoice that had my name attached to project budgets, every receipt for the gear I purchased before we had funding. I exported commit logs, annotated timelines, and documented dependencies they'd never untangle without me. I didn't know yet when I'd need it, but I knew one thing: this wasn't incompetence, it was strategy. They weren't overlooking me, they were replacing me. Slowly, deliberately, so it looked natural, like I'd faded out, drifted off, become irrelevant. But I hadn't faded. I hadn't drifted. I was watching, recording, waiting, because they weren't just underestimating me. They were building their entire future on something they didn't legally own. And when the time came, I'd show them exactly how fatal that mistake would be. The server room was never locked. That's the thing that always stuck with me, not the betrayal, not the gaslighting, not even Jared's brainstorm walls covered in stolen post-its and bro grammar. No, what burned deepest was how little they cared about the infrastructure they were building their dreams on. It was all vapor and vibes with these people. They treated the company like a startup-themed escape room: flashlights, caffeine, and optimism. Meanwhile, the real bones, the data, the early code base, the buried architecture decisions that held the whole Frankenstein together, those were left unguarded. Literally. So I walked in at 9:48 p.m. on a Wednesday. Lights off. My badge still worked. No security cameras in that part of the floor because we never got around to phase 2. The hum of stacked machines welcomed me like an old friend, low and warm and mechanical, one of the few voices in that building that didn't lie. The hard drive I needed was easy to spot, still labeled in my handwriting from the early days: Carol Main backup, do not touch. And naturally someone had. The label was peeled halfway off, a coffee ring on the corner. Jared again, probably, or worse, someone even dumber. I plugged in my own encrypted drive and got to work. Methodical, quiet, precise, core modules, early API builds, comms between me and our first angel investor. Screenshots of Slack threads long deleted, backup versions of docs that had been edited for consistency by Jared's invisible hand. I wasn't downloading company data. I was reclaiming my own work, years of it, buried under layers of team collaboration and revisionist history. While the files transferred, I sat cross-legged on the concrete floor and pulled up an old memory. October 14th, 1:07 a.m. My kitchen smelled like burnt ramen. The space heater under the desk kept shorting out the circuit. I'd just come back from my day job, admin temp for logistics firm, and I couldn't sleep, so I cracked open my laptop and started writing code. The first line became the first function, then a prototype, then a fragile little interface that did something no one else in our space had done yet. It worked. Reliably, cleanly, on garbage hardware and spotty Wi-Fi. That was the night the company was born, though we didn't know it then. Back when it was just me, duct tape ThinkPad, and a dream I didn't even have the energy to name. I'd emailed a few friends that night with the subject line, "Finally cracked it." Attached was a zipped folder and a warning: be gentle, she's still got bugs. I'd built it all before a single NDA was signed, before a single founder's deck was drafted, before any of the bro-founding trinity had so much as bought a whiteboard. The idea, the architecture, the executable files, mine. And I had proof. I stood up, brushed off my jeans, and walked back to my desk, the drive now full in my pocket. A relic, a weapon. Back at home, I opened my inbox and typed a phrase I hadn't searched in years: provisional filing hash US 82XXXXX. There it was, dated and sealed. A quiet little email from the USPTO confirming my ownership of the system architecture, the core logic, the very soul of the product they now called revolutionary. Filed under my name, not the company's, not the founder's. Mine. I stared at that line of text, my lips curling into the first real smile I'd allowed myself in weeks. It wasn't just pride, it was justice in slow motion. I'd done it right. Back then, I didn't even know why, maybe paranoia, maybe instinct, but I'd filed before anything was formalized, before the boys showed up with their buzzwords and burn rates. Now, that filing was the quiet bomb ticking beneath their entire valuation. Let them keep their deck. Let Jared get his LinkedIn likes and keynote panels. Let the director sell the fantasy. I had the original blueprint and the receipt. The calendar invite hit my inbox at 7:13 a.m. sharp. Subject, Board Sync Strategic Restructure. No context, no prep docs, just a 30-minute block sandwiched between Jared's innovation recap and some all-hands no one ever paid attention to. I stared at the subject line for a full minute, coffee in hand, teeth clenched. They don't put strategic restructure in the subject line unless someone's getting thrown off the ship. And I already knew who the body was. They just wanted me to show up and play dead. Still, I clicked accept. Showered. Dressed in the same black blazer I wore the day we landed our first client, the one I stayed up 2 nights straight coding that demo for. Then I printed exactly one page from my personal archive, the org chart I built from scratch during our Series A. I slipped it into a manila folder, not because I planned to use it, just because I wanted something in my hand when the axe dropped. When I stepped into the boardroom, the energy was off. Too polished, too pre-coordinated, the kind of silence that only comes from rehearsed betrayal. The director, Greg, greeted me with a smile so tight it looked like it had been botoxed into place. The other board members offered nods. Jared was there, of course, in some limited edition sneakers that probably cost more than my month's rent. Carol, Greg began, clasping his hands like a priest about to deliver last rites, thanks for joining on short notice. We wanted to have a quick conversation about company direction. I said nothing, just sat, opened my notebook, pen ready, pretending I was taking notes instead of counting the seconds until the mask dropped. Greg cleared his throat. As you know, we're heading into a new growth phase, and with that comes necessary adjustments in leadership alignment. We've been doing some thinking about org structure, specifically around roles that support versus drive innovation. Jared nodded solemnly. The idiot thought he was being respectful. Greg continued, your contributions have been solid, but frankly, your results are a little too aggressive for a woman in this kind of collaborative environment. There it was, word for word, like someone had dared him to say it out loud in 2025. Too aggressive. For a woman, I didn't blink, didn't laugh, didn't flip the table, though I thought about it. Instead, I reached into my bag, pulled out my badge, and slid it across the table. No words, no drama, just metal against wood. Greg blinked, surprised. So you understand? I understand perfectly, I said, voice level. Good luck with the restructure. Then I stood, one breath, two. I turned to leave and no one stopped me. But before I walked out of that boardroom for the last time, I took a little detour. Back to my desk, back to my keyboard. One shared drive, archives Carol. Been left untouched in the chaos. They assumed it was just legacy junk. They always assume. I didn't delete it, that would set off alerts. I just tweaked permissions just enough to make it inaccessible to everyone but me. I logged the change manually to avoid triggering automated systems. No flags, no emails, just silence. Then I shut my laptop, picked up the photo on my desk, me and the original team back when we were all broke and hopeful. I slipped it into my bag, left everything else. On the elevator ride down, my heart pounded like a war drum. Not from fear, not even from rage, from restraint. I could already feel the fire in my chest being replaced by something colder, sharper, something surgical, because they thought the boardroom was the end of the story, that I'd walk out like some bitter ghost, forgotten by next quarter's ockers. What they didn't know, that was just the prologue. 3 days after they escorted me out, legal finally noticed I was gone. The email came in plain text, no pleasantries, no call to check in, not even a fake HR best of luck on your next journey. Just a block of cold corporaties from a junior counsel I'd never met. Carol, per your offboarding, please confirm in writing that all proprietary assets, equipment, and intellectual property belonging to company name have been returned or destroyed. No signature, no thank you. No acknowledgement of 5 years of my life turned into lines of code and sleepless nights. I read it twice. Once as the old Carol, who might have still cared, still held out hope they'd realized the mistake. Then again as the new Carol, the one forged in their dismissals, in their theft of my work, in their smug certainty that I'd fade into silence. I hit reply. Assets not owned by you have not been returned. That was it. No attachments. No explanations. Just enough to make someone in legal sweat through their button-up if they actually read it. But they didn't reply. Not that day, not the next. Silence, like they were hoping I'd go away if they just stopped making eye contact. Classic corporate tactic. Pretend ambiguity is consent, so I leaned into the ambiguity. I let the silence spread like a stain. Meanwhile, I got to work. I pulled up the LinkedIn page for our lead investor, Marcus Lee, partner at Alderstone Capital, known for his data-driven diligence and quiet interest in IP ownership. Translation: the kind of man who will shake your hand and gut your valuation in the same hour if your paperwork stinks. We'd spoken once, years ago, during our seed round. He remembered me, not because I was loud, but because I asked the one question his team didn't expect. How does your firm handle IP recovery when a founder exits unplanned? His eyebrows had gone up. He'd smiled, slow and curious. You speak like someone who's seen things fall apart. I had. And I remembered the look in his eyes when I asked it, so I sent him a message. Subject, clarification, request IP attribution short, professional. Just enough to raise an eyebrow without triggering a defensive forward to legal. Hi Marcus, hope this finds you well. There's a minor ambiguity in the company's IP documentation regarding foundational contributions. Before your team finalizes the Q4 investment package, I'd like to provide clarification. Happy to do a quick sync if helpful. I knew the moment I sent it he'd bite. These guys don't like surprises, especially not the kind that carry filing numbers and footnotes. Within 3 hours, his assistant replied, Marcus has 15 minutes free Friday at 2:45 p.m. Will that work? Oh, it would work just fine. The next day, I sat on my porch with a fresh copy of the patent filing in my lap, watching the leaves shift in the wind like they were plotting something. My inbox pinged again, press release draft, leaked early. Company name set to close $40M Series B, flagship product launch slated for Q1. Jared's name was in it, as Chief Innovation Officer. No mention of me, no hint of the years I spent building the foundation they were standing on. But I didn't feel rage this time. I felt ready because the fuse was lit. The dominoes were lined up, and Marcus Lee, he wasn't just going to hear my side, he was going to see the folder, the filings, the contracts, and the moment he did, the boardroom I'd been forced to exit was going to burn from the inside out. Not with fire, with footnotes. They wanted to play executive roulette, but they forgot one rule: never spin the chamber when the bullet has a name. The launch video dropped on a Tuesday. Polished, pretentious, perfectly staged. A slow drone shot of the office exterior, complete with that faux industrial steel staircase no one used except interns on their first day. Cut to Jared, sitting on the edge of a desk he absolutely never worked at, talking about reshaping the future of integrated platforms with a voice that sounded like he'd taken 2 Ambien and a podcasting course. I watched from the quiet of my apartment, coffee in hand, bathrobe still on, as my life's work got turned into a marketing asset. The demo screen they flashed at the 114 mark, that was my interface, my layout. The button spacing, the color theory, the keyboard shortcuts, down to the microsecond delay between hover states. Every line, every decision, every sleepless night, all of it, still there, still mine. They hadn't even changed the loading animation. They just slapped their new logo on top and called it version 1.0. Like I hadn't already versioned it a dozen times on my own machine back when the company was just an idea in my living room and the team was me and a space heater. I let the video run in the background while I opened the PDF on my second monitor. Title: Licensing Agreement, Intellectual Property Rights, Independent Contractor Entity, Client. Company name, Licensor, CL. Systems, LLC, filing date, 2 weeks prior, status, executed. Terms, usage of software contingent upon written agreement from licensor. License revocable. No sublicensing without express permission. Term, 1 year, renewable. The signature on the final page was mine, and so was the LLC. I'd filed it through a virtual lawyer service at 3 a.m., 3 days after walking out of the boardroom. Registered the name, tied it to the provisional patent, set up the account, backdated every proof of authorship, timestamped every version of the prototype to show lineage that predated the company itself. It wasn't spite, it was precision. You see, they never asked who actually owned the tech, they just assumed. They thought incorporation made everything inside theirs. They forgot the difference between build and own, between collaborate and create, between employee and inventor. So I made it legal, quietly, surgically, without fanfare. The code was mine, the architecture mine, the functionality that made their new product worth $40 million in investor whispers, mine. And now on paper, they didn't have the right to use any of it. Not unless they came back to me and asked for it. Nicely. Legally. I paused the launch video at the exact frame where Jared was pointing at a screen during his demo, a smug grin plastered across his face like a kid who just figured out how a flashlight works. Then I opened the file directory on my desktop labeled Chain of Custody. Inside were the notarized design docs, the email confirmations, the code diffs, and the cross-reference timestamps. Everything lined up, every breadcrumb in place. The same afternoon, Tech Pulse published a headline, company name set to close $40M Series B following flagship launch, quoting anonymous sources. Historic growth, built from the ground up. Trailblazing team. They forgot to mention the team fired the one person who actually built anything. I didn't comment, didn't post, didn't retweet. Instead, I booked a second meeting with Marcus Lee's assistant. The note was simple, following up with IP documentation. Happy to walk through licensing timeline and legal structure. She confirmed in under 10 minutes. Marcus was interested, very interested. I closed the laptop, looked around the quiet of my apartment. No champagne, no balloons, just me and the hum of machine that still remembered every line I ever fed it. Let them celebrate. Let them raise their glasses to Jared and his vision. The real celebration would come later, when the money hit a wall made of law, and the only door through it had my signature on it. And I had every reason not to open it. The folder started as a joke, just a slim manila envelope I labeled in case of fire and shoved into my bag like it was nothing. But over the next few days, it thickened like a bruise. I spent my mornings in a quiet corner booth at Cafe Marlowe, a place where the espresso tasted like regret and the Wi-Fi password still used underscores. Nobody asked questions there. It was the kind of place where people came to either finish novels or finalize divorces. I brought my laptop, my headphones, and a stack of printouts that could kill a Series B in under 10 minutes. The notary met me on a rainy Thursday. Mid-40s, smelled like peppermint and toner. Didn't ask why I needed half a dozen documents certified, or why some of them included timestamp screenshots of commit histories. She just checked my ID, clicked her little metal stamp, and slid everything back with a nod. Each page went into the folder like a brick being laid in a foundation no one else knew existed. First, the patent filing, stamped, signed. Foundation of it all. Then the original wireframes drawn by hand, scanned, and annotated in the margins with notes I hadn't looked at in years. QOL fixes, Jared doesn't get this. That one made me laugh. Next, the architecture diagrams, still in their original Illustrator files, watermarked with my initials and the old timestamp from before the founders ever picked a company name. Then came the Slack exports, the emails, meeting notes where I'd flagged potential IP confusion, and the passive-aggressive replies from leadership brushing me off with phrases like, "Not a priority this sprint." And finally, I printed a single page from an old startup legal guide. The clause was buried in Section 14. In the absence of a formal assignment agreement, intellectual property developed prior to incorporation remains the property of the individual creator. I highlighted it, folded it, slipped it into the very front of the folder like a bookmark soaked in gasoline. Then I closed it, secured the clasp, slid it back into my bag. I didn't feel triumphant, not yet. I felt precise, like a surgeon sharpening her tools while the hospital staff partied down the hall. That evening, I walked home as the city turned gold in the setting sun. My phone buzzed once. Subject, Q4 board meeting, investor presentation location. 16th floor conference room time, Friday, 3 o'clock p.m. Organizer, Marcus Lee's assistant. No explanation, no CCs, no agenda attached. They didn't invite me, of course. I wasn't supposed to be in the room. That calendar event was a leak, quiet, deliberate. A hint. They were going to show off the product. Try to seal the $40 million deal. Use my work, my code. I diagrams my architecture as props in a theater of deception. And Marcus? He'd seen just enough to know something didn't smell right. He wanted me to walk in, not to talk, to detonate. The elevator ride to the 16th floor was silent, save for the soft hum of overhead lights and the low static buzz of my own pulse. I could feel the weight of the folder pressing against my palm like a living thing. Not fear, not even anger anymore. Just gravity. Kind that settles in your bones when you know, without question, that you're holding the end of someone else's fantasy. I wore black slacks, a gray blouse, and a coat that didn't beg for attention. No makeup, no performative smile. Just calm, clean lines and the kind of stillness that makes people nervous when they notice it too late. The doors opened. Nobody looked up. The receptionist, new and fresh out of undergrad, didn't even blink as I walked by. I didn't badge. Didn't need to. The boardroom was already open. They were mid-presentation, voices elevated in that strained, cheerful cadence people use when they're pretending to believe their own pitch. Jared stood at the head of the table, sleeves rolled, sneakers white, voice cracking slightly as he said something about leveraging high proficiency at scale. A screen behind him showed my interface, live demo, complete with the login animation I designed on a Sunday in 2019 after skipping brunch to debug a memory leak. Nobody noticed me at first. I slipped in and stood quietly by the glass wall, watched them dance. Marcus Lee sat 3 seats from the head, pen resting on his notepad, unreadable expression frozen into place. Then Greg saw me. The director's brow tightened like a drawstring garbage bag. His mouth twitched into a smile so sharp you could have shaved his ego with it. Well, he said, loud enough to draw attention. Surprised to see you here, Carol. Missed the spotlight already? I stepped forward. Calm, slow, folder in hand. I thought the investors might want this, I said simply, placing the manila folder directly in front of Marcus. Greg scoffed. We're in the middle of something, Carol. I know, I replied. So is this. Jared looked confused, which wasn't unusual, but now it was contagious. A few of the other board members leaned forward, eyeing the folder like it might start ticking. Marcus didn't say a word, he just opened it. The first thing he saw was the clause. Section 14 highlighted in fluorescent yellow. Then came the wireframes, the diagrams, the time-stamped emails, the licensing agreement, the notarized filing, the signature, the patent number. With each page, his face paled another degree, not in shock, but in recognition. In inevitability, I stood still. Hands clasped in front of me, unmoving. Greg leaned toward Marcus, trying to read upside down. What is that? Marcus finally spoke, voice quiet but razor-edged. You don't own this tech. A beat passed. Then, who did you just fire? Nobody breathed. Jared's lips parted like he was about to ask a question, then closed again. His hand, I noticed, had started to shake. Behind me. Hallway outside was still. The kind of still that follows a shot but precedes the fall. Greg said my name, sharper this time. Carol, but I was already turning. No need to finish, I said over my shoulder. The folder does it for me. And then I walked out, heels tapping softly against the hardwood, while behind me the room erupted, not into shouts, not yet, but into scrambling, whispered curses. Paper rustling like panic wearing a tie. I didn't look back. Didn't need to, because the folder had arrived, and their countdown had begun. The silence broke with paper. A single sheet sliding across mahogany as Marcus flipped it over and said, with the calm finality of a man dropping a guillotine blade, "This is her patent." Every oxygen molecule in that boardroom vanished in an instant. Greg blinked, then turned to the CEO, Arthur, poor Arthur, who looked like someone had just told him his entire portfolio was built on a game of Monopoly played by drunk toddlers. He stammered, tried to speak, then resorted to that old executive move. Repeat the obvious until someone makes it untrue. No, that can't be. We filed the IP years ago. I mean, Marcus didn't look at him. He looked at legal. Specifically, the firm's external counsel, seated at the end of the table. A woman named Sharon, who had thus far remained silent, bored even. Now she was flipping through the folder like it had just started whispering dark secrets in her ear. She stopped on page 4, then again on page 9. Then she closed the folder slowly like she was trying not to wake a sleeping bomb. Marcus looked at her. Do we own the platform? Sharon pressed her lips into a straight line. The provisional filing predates the incorporation. There's no assignment of rights on record. Not from her. He nodded once. And the licensing agreement? Filed under a separate entity. Carol retained legal ownership. There's no valid transfer without her explicit signature. That's when he turned back to Arthur. Calm, colder now. You don't own the tech, he said, each word flat as a scalpel. She does. Who did you just fire? Arthur looked like he wanted to vomit but couldn't afford the dry cleaning. Jared started to speak, something about team effort and collaborative spirit, but Marcus cut him off with a look that could have stopped time. Then I spoke. Just one last time. Section 7.4 of your founder contract, I said, addressing the room without stepping back inside, states that no technology transfer is valid without signatory approval from the originating IP holder. A few of them scrambled to pull up their laptops. Others just stared. I turned fully now, standing just at the threshold of the room, folder in hand, coat buttoned. You never got my signature, I said. You never even asked for it. I turned again, began walking. Behind me, Greg's voice cracked through the tension like a whip. Get her back in here. Chairs scraped. Paper shuffled. One of them stood up, but I didn't stop. I walked, down the hall with the same calm they mistook for compliance. Heels striking the floor with quiet authority, folder tucked under my arm like a final chapter they forgot to read. The boardroom erupted behind me, raised voices, phones dialing, someone muttering how bad is it, and legal snapping back, do you want the short version or the real one? But all that faded as I moved down the corridor, past the glass offices and product posters and slick, empty slogans about innovation and moving fast. Funny, they moved fast. I moved first. And now they were out of road. Thanks for watching, you cubicle warriors. Hit that subscribe button. Unless you're my old boss, then you're on your own. Revenge of the coffee pot strikes again.